Hey, what's up everyone? So, real quick video just on setting up Endplay for the crank. There's a trick, instead of putting the crank in the block, bolting it all down, checking it, unbolting it, if it's out, and standing on your thrust bearings, bolting it back, checking it again. Real quick, you can go ahead and put lubricant on your thrust bearing, put it on your crank, just like this, and you can take feeler gauges and check it. So spec for this 944 block is 0.11 to 0.312 millimeters. I've got feeler gauges here, and I've got a 0.1 feeler gauge, and that goes in pretty well. Okay, so but spec is just a little bit bigger than 0.1, so I've got this 0.15, and that goes in pretty well. It's pretty tight. I'd say that's probably exactly where it's at, which should be within spec. It should be runnable. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the next bearing, just to make sure that that one is also good, and then clean it all up and put it in. Alright, so I showed you how to measure the clearance in between the thrust bearing and the crank while the crank is out, and that will translate into your end play, assuming that your thrust bearings aren't lined up. I don't know if I got good footage of trying to measure that end play. If I did, I'll put it somewhere, I don't know. On a more conventional engine, like an LS, you tighten the mains down the first pass and then push the crank forward, push it backwards, push it forwards again, or vice versa, one of the two, and that will line up the thrust bearings. On this engine, it's a little bit different, so it's got a girdle instead of mains. The Porsche manual actually says to tighten up the first pass and then tap it backwards with a plastic mallet, and they're actually wanting you to do that to line up the oil pump mating surfaces, because it bolts onto from the block and girdle. I measured 0.15 clearance with feeler gauges, and that translates, that's like about 6 thousandths. When I bolted down the girdle using the method Porsche had in the manual, I only had 4 thousandths, and I could see that my thrust bearings were not lined up. But also, if you've had that engine apart before, the girdle is actually located using roll pins, and that girdle's not going to move very much. But what I ended up doing was I took some flat stock and drilled holes in it and bolted it across the front of the engine and the front of that girdle, using the holes for the oil pump, and then tightening it down, and that actually lined up my thrust bearings, and when I measured, I had 6 thousandths. But yeah, thanks for watching this quick tip, and subscribe and like. Thanks.